The story of Job continues with the introduction of the three friends Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. It says, when Job's three friends, Eliphaz, the Temanite, again Teman is from the territory of Edom, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. Though as it will turn out, they will not be of much comfort at all. But they start off pretty good. When they saw him, they could hardly recognize him. And they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him. And indeed, when people are in great suffering, they don't necessarily need you to talk to them all that much. But your being there, your presence can be of great comfort and help. But then when you get to chapter 3, something seems to break in Job. Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He said, "May the day of my birth perish. The night in which it was said, a boy is born, that day may it turn to darkness. May God above not care for it. May no light shine upon it. May darkness and deep shadow claim it once more. May a cloud settle over it. May darkness overwhelm its light. That day may thick darkness seize it. May it not be included among the days of the year or be entered in any of the months." He goes on to say, "Why is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death, but it does not come, who search for it more than hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave?" Now, healthy young people can hardly imagine that you would look at death as a blessing. But those who are horribly ill sometimes will look at it that way. But then he says this, "Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? For sighs come to me instead of food, my groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil." Now the issue at this point is, did Job lose his faith in chapter 3? He had done so well earlier on. He had passed the first test when he lost his wealth and his children. He passed the second test initially when he lost his health and refused to curse God and die as his wife advised him to do. But now it's as if he's like an elevator cable whose cable has broken and he's coming crashing down. Will it prove to be true that Satan was right after all? Well, at this point, Job's friends perk up, and you have the first cycle of dialogues between Job and his friends. And in that cycle, the question that is going to be raised, is Job a great sinner? Because all three of the friends will say the same thing in their own way. Job, the reason that you suffer is because you have sinned. So the answer of Job's friends is that Job suffers because he has sinned. That's what their accusation is going to be all the way through. Now, each one says it in his own way. Eliphaz in chapter 4, starting in verse 2, says it very politely. "If someone ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? But who can keep from speaking? Think how you have instructed many, how you've strengthened feeble hands. Your words have supported those who stumbled. You have strengthened faltering knees, but now trouble comes to you and you are discouraged. It strikes you and you are dismayed. Should not your piety be your confidence and your blameless ways your hope? Consider now, who being innocent ever perished? And where were the upright ever destroyed? As I have observed, those that plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. Now he's a little bit indirect, but what he's saying is you have trouble because you're reaping what you've sown. You must have sinned. Bildad says it a little more directly. Bildad the Shuhite, oh, by the way, that reminds me of an old joke. Who's the shortest man in the Bible? And one answer is Bildad the Shuhite, because after all, he's even shorter than Nehemiah. Of course, if you add the New Testament, there's a guard that slept on their watch. They must be even smaller still. Well, enough of this small humor. Then Bildad the Shuhite replied, how long will you say such things? Your words are a blustering wind. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. And so what Bildad is saying is, Job, not only have you sinned, but your children sinned also. And they must have deserved the punishment they received when the tornado came and knocked down the house and killed them all. Zophar puts it in his own way. He says, then Zophar the Naamathite replied, are all these words to go unanswered? Is this talker to be vindicated? Will your idle talk reduce men to silence? Will no one rebuke you when you mock? You say to God, my beliefs are flawless and I am pure in your sight. Oh, how I wish that God would speak, that he would open his lips against you and disclose to you the secrets of wisdom, for true wisdom has two sides. Know this, that God has even forgotten some of your sin. So each of Job's friends, each accused Job of being a sinner, and not only Job, but also his family of being sinners, and that's why they have suffered the way that they have. Job, in the meantime, pleads not guilty to these charges. He doesn't believe he's a great sinner. He says, if I have sinned, what have I done to you, O watcher of men? Why have you made me your target? Also in Job chapter 9 and verse 17, for he bruises me without cause. Chapter 9 and verse 33, if only there were someone to arbitrate between us, to lay his hand upon us both. If he could just talk to God, he could hash out how God has made some kind of mistake in blaming him for non-existent sins. He wishes he could argue with God. Even if I am innocent, I cannot lift my head. If I hold my head high, you stalk me like a lion. So he pleads not guilty. He seems to be saying that God has somehow made a mistake in punishing him for sins that he didn't commit, and he wishes that he could have a mediator or some sort of audience with God in which he could hash these things out. Now, we should make a remark that both Job and his friends have a simplistic theology. Both Job and his friends believe that the righteous are blessed while the wicked are punished. Hence the friends condemn Job because he's a great sinner, since he's been punished so much. Job believes the same thing, but concludes that God has been unfair because he's being punished for things he hasn't done. Job knows from his own experience that he hasn't sinned so badly as to deserve the kind of horrible suffering which he has experienced. So Job's theology is challenged by Job's own experience. Now, does Job in fact suffer because of sin? Well, we know from the prologue that Job and his friends are wrong in Job's particular case. God himself declares Job to be a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. And so the reason Job is suffering is not because he has sinned. He is suffering in part because God is allowing Satan to test his faith. Of course, you could raise the question, do some people suffer as a direct result of sin? Well, yes, of course. I mean, a lot of suffering is self-inflicted. If you drink too much, you may get cirrhosis of the liver. If you are a thief, you might end up in prison. If you commit murder, you could end up being executed. If you drive recklessly, you might end up with a horrible automobile accident that may cause you to suffer the rest of your life. Some suffering is self-afflicted as a result of personal sin. The problem with Job and his friends, however, is that they believe that virtually all suffering is a direct result of sin. And we know from the prologue that isn't the reason why Job suffers. We'll continue with the dialogue between Job and his friends in the next video.